Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hardcore Metal Detecting Radio Show. I'm Derek Askler, and Mr. Craig Talley's on the line. We'll be hosting this show tonight, and it's kind of pretty much open lines tonight. But I did want to start off with a couple topics here, and I kind of halfway discussed them with Craig for about 5 minutes. I actually got home this afternoon, and I was looking on the internet. Just information on metal detectors in general, the operation of metal detectors and how they work and everything. And I got onto a topic. Well, Craig will tell you, it gets kind of deep, and I'm not a professional at electronics at all. Neither is Craig. I mean, Craig, your dad was really into radios and stuff like that, right? And your brother's
Yeah, he was an electrical engineer, and he had a crystal set when he was like 9 years old. He built.
Yeah.
My brother was, into mechanical stuff. When he was 9 years old, he started taking engines apart and putting them back together in cars.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's something that I've been interested in, but I'm not I don't know. I can't sit there and I know how to work on, certain detectors and stuff like that. I know how the pathways are and, how to fix certain things and, make them work and everything, but I have no idea about the general, I guess what you call it, Craig, the electronics, how to build them, put the circuits together, how they work, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like just total foreign language to me. And I think it is, you too, Craig. I mean, we have a general idea, but.
Yeah, back then it wasn't, in the old days, it wasn't like that. It was, it was kind of like like a circuit board or something.
Well, yeah.
It was like
tubes and.
It was. Well, it wasn't tubes.
No.
It was, that whole part was pretty heavy and pretty big in the machine, in the box. That's why the boxes were so big. But,
yeah, I mean.
They started doing, they didn't have a lot of meters and stuff back then. Remember we were talking about that BFO.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? Metrotech was, I think, a BFO machine that most people, rally hunters, used. And we were talking about the frequency and stuff, and these things wouldn't pick up anything small. There was only, big objects. They'd pick up bullets and belt buckles and stuff like that, but had a hard time getting buttons.
Right.
And, that my dad always explained it to me, that there was probably two things that had to do with the signal when you send and receive it. One is noise ratio, signal to noise ratio. The more power you put into the ground, the more noisy it becomes.
Right.
And then it's like you can't, then you can't read the signal. It's like, just too noisy to pick out a good signal.
Right.
But then the other one is the inverse square ratio. So you have to put more each time you want to double the distance down. You have to do inverse square ratio, which it gets to the point where there's so much power has to be put into the ground. You can't do it.
Right.
So those are two of the main things that affect, the VLF stuff. The only way you get around is going bigger with the coil to go, more depth.
Right, or changing up total way to do it.
I think, with the Bliss tool, somehow he's figured out how to get around the signal to noise ratio and the, inverse square ratio. Somehow, that's the only thing I can figure.
Yeah, well, this is all coming about too. I mean, I wanted to read. I came across this article, and I was just telling Craig about it. I wanted to know the physical or whatever the difference between typical balanced metal detectors or the essentially. I'm thinking that they're called beat frequency oscillator. BFO versus induction balance. All right, and I come across this article. It's a ETI Project 549, induction balanced metal detectors. This was written in 1977 in Electronics Today International, I guess, Wimborne Publishing. But it says a real sensitive design operating on a different principle from that of other published circuits. That this induction balance circuit will really sniff out those buried coins and other items of interest at great depths, depending on the size of the object. And they said on top of this, is oh, another metal detector. Some of you will say that, yes or no, or say yes or no to that. But several designs have been published in the hobby electronics magazines, some good, some downright lousy, but they all invariably have been beat frequency oscillator, BFO types. There's nothing wrong with this principle. They're at least easy to build and simple to set up. The design described here works on a very different principle, and that of an induction balance. This is also known as a tri-principle, transmit receive. And what got me, this is the next part is what got me here about what we're using as far as frequencies. It says all metal detectors have to work within certain frequency bands to comply with regulations and license, and a license is necessary to operate them. It says at a cost of $1.20 for 5 years or something like this. This was written down, 1977. But it says first word of warning: electronic circuitry of this project is straightforward and presents no difficulty even to a beginner. However, successful operation depends almost entirely on the construction of the search head or coil. This part accounts for 3/4 of the effort. Great care, neatness, and patience, so on. But it says that a sloppy construction of a coil will invariably, skew the whole project. In other words, you got to build it right. But it says induction balance versus BFO. The usual circuit for metal locators is shown in Figure 2A. It's a BFO system or balance. It says usually a 6-inch coil or a 6-inch diameter is needed to operate the circuit to oscillate between 100 and 150 kilohertz. The second internal oscillator operating on the same frequency is included, and a tiny part of each signal is taken into a mixer and a beat note is produced when the search coil is brought near metal. The inductance, boy, they put up some weird words, of the coil changes slightly, alternating the frequency and thus the tone or a note. The note is produced continually, and the metal is identified by the frequency change in the audio note. So it's the audio signal. That's how it's identified. But it said in the induction balance principle uses two coils arranged in such a way that there is virtually no inductive pickup between the two. A modulated signal is fed into one when the metal is brought near the electromagnetic field is disturbed, and the receiver coil picks up an appreciable higher signal. However, it is impractical if there is no pickup, the two coils are after all laid on top of each other. So essentially they're saying, they're put on top of each other. There's no way to identify, at this time anyways. Also, our ears are poor in identifying changes in audio level. I don't know if I agree with that part of it, Craig. I guess being in the hobby and dealing with metal detectors in general, we hunt by tone and nuance, and we're sensitive to differences, even though we can't describe them.
I don't think a lot of people do, though.
Oh, well, maybe not. Maybe we've trained our ears.
Most people use meters nowadays.
That's true.
So
that's true.
And I was always, I was always hearing things. I could get a signal and not even look at the meter and go, well, that sounds like a silver dime. And I look at the meter, and sure enough, it would be dime, and I'd dig it up. But it was only on certain machines that had those nuances. Some of them I could hear brass, things like that, brass and copper.
This may also explain why not explain why, but I know that when I used Tornado coil on the AT Pro, I mean, everybody says it too. You don't get a good VDI number. It could be anywhere, but the signal itself it's a dig me signal or a good signal, so you dig it, and you're able to get a lot better depth with that coil. And I know I could, hit some pretty deep dimes with it because of, I don't know how it's reading it or whatever. I'm not an electronics guy, but I mean, it's just the target ID and the, I guess it would be the depth too when you try to pinpoint are going to be kind of farther off. But they said the circuit is, this circuit, the induction balance circuit, is therefore arranged so that the signal is gated and is set up so that only the minutest part of a signal is heard when no metal is in its presence. When the coil is near metal, only a minute change in the level becomes anonymous change in volume. BFO detectors are not as sensitive as induction balance types and have been fitted with a Faraday screen. I'm not going to even try to explain. I know what that is, but some of you may do it, but we're just going to read on through that. But a Faraday cage to reduce the capacity levels on the coil. Therefore, or they are, however, slightly better than induction balance when it comes to identifying exactly where a metal is buried. They can pinpoint more easily. They go through a lot more on there, but what I thought was interesting is at the time of the BFO detectors, the induction balance, it wasn't as good as the BFO. They didn't have the technology, or they didn't know how to have it read out or take the information and put it on as far as being accurate on a target ID type thing, or how to pinpoint with it. But apparently they've fixed that. I'm not sure how many of the detectors out there right now that have been produced in the last few years are actually induction balanced. I know that the Bliss tool was. I know the Quest is. I'm not sure about, and I guess I have to, maybe one of you guys can tell me, anybody who has an Equinox or a Deus, it should say it in your descriptions of what your detector does as far as, when you buy, you have that, what frequency it is and that kind of thing. Whether that they are induction balanced also, or that would explain a lot of what happened with the older detectors. You couldn't get very deep with them. I mean, I remember the old, I'm not going to give a bunch of names out. It really doesn't matter, but why the technology is jumping, why they're able to do what other detectors in the maybe 10 years ago couldn't even accomplish. You know what I mean, Craig? And
yeah.
It fries your mind a little bit when you sit there and think about it. But I just looked this up tonight because, I've been using a Bliss tool for 5 years, and I knew it was induction balanced. I think he called it Super B balanced or something like that. How they've, Ahmed and other companies have figured out how to take that signal and use it. But when they're talking about two coils laid on top of each other, with no space in between, well, now we have a double D, which is two coils next to each other. The double D design. It's like a D, one D backwards, one D, whatever, to have a blade search path to make the circuit complete right there. And maybe that has something to do with it. But I'm sure they have these signals going in through computer chips to filter them. Maybe call it filters. I wish I was more technically inclined when it comes to electronics, Craig, but I'm not. But, it's something interesting to look at. I'll put it up. I may be able to post it up right here. Let me see if I can copy and paste that onto the chat page. I don't know if it'll let me do it or not. I'll at least put the where I got. Oh, I hit the wrong doggone one. Hang on, sorry. Kind of a weird thing. I usually don't do this much, but I might try to copy it and see if I can paste it up on here on the chat part. Of course, it's not going to let me. I'll get it posted up on the Facebook page afterwards, and it's only like 6 pages long. It gives diagrams on how these things work, or how they made it work and everything. So it might be really interesting to you guys, the inner workings of these metal detectors, how they're progressing, and how they're able to whether there's something else out there that we can do to accomplish the same thing better. as far as the electronics inside these metal detectors. What technology are they going to use next? Whether they can go to, we're already low VLF, very low frequency metal detectors. Is there, on the negative side of the frequency, is there a higher frequency we can use within the regulations that'd be more accurate, or just all around better? Now that we have these other circuits that can handle these induction balance or whatever type they come up with, it can handle the information and be able to put it off into a signal that we can understand, whether it and not be where it's something you wouldn't be able to hear with the human ear type thing. It's kind of deep topic, but I just thought it was important because I've been looking for an answer to that. That seemed to be about the best one I found so far. You see a lot of stuff talked about on the forums and stuff. I know I'm trying to remember what was that one where a lot of the guys are really into the electronics part of it. Was it not NetGeo? There was a website, and I remember White's was on there. A lot of the technicians get on there and talk about stuff. I'm trying to remember the name of the forum. I don't even know if it's still around or not, but I was on there for a little while just to read information because I'm not qualified to give any kind of technical information like that, so I never really posted on there. I was just more reading what the guys posted up, what their thoughts were, what they were going to change and stuff like that. It's on the tip of my tongue.
There's one site I look at. It's Tesoro, and they got how to mod the machines.
Right.
And they got little diagrams. People even sell parts, boost it, all kinds of different things. Pretty cool that you can do that. But some of these guys, they probably say, "Oh, it's going to void your warranty" or something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we got people like, I just use him as an example because Craig and I used to watch his videos, and we were just talking about him the other day. Hendrix, he was on YouTube, and I haven't seen a lot from him, but he's probably an older guy, but man, the guy was like a mad scientist with metal detectors. He made his own Deus coil, a bigger one, and he put visual eye, or a 7-inch, and then he come up with a visual meter for the bliss tool, and then he actually ferrite or whatever tuned the coil even more on one of the other detectors with a piece of ferrite. And this guy, he has oscilloscopes and multimeters and all this, and he's really into this stuff. But his premise, I thought, was really good. It was interesting, and some of the people that, well, not everybody, but there was a couple out there that said, well, if we're going to build something like that, we're going to do it even better than it. But I thought it was really cool that this guy obviously comes from an electrical background, but really was coming up with some, at least, ways to really tune these machines, really, boost them. And I don't know whether, I've heard FCC rules and everything, but I always heard that for over 18 years with CB radios and stuff like that. You can't run this many watts and everything. I was running 2,600 watts out of my CB radio. With kickers and everything else. I could talk, on a skip. I talked to Jamaica, everything else right out of my semi. But, obviously, by the standards they're saying, it was essentially taking a ham radio and turning it down into a regular citizen's band radio. I think I had a North Star at the time, but getting off topic. But, I mean, trying to figure out a bandwidth, or using the same bandwidth we're really allowed to use as far as the whether it's running 8 kilohertz or 150 kilohertz in that range, to use use it differently, to change it up and maybe create a new way of running a metal detector. I don't know what's in the future of it. I mean, what are your thoughts, Craig? What do you think they're going to come up with next? Any ideas? Or
I don't know. People are working on, one of the things is people want more accurate readings on the meters, and, especially at depth. Of course, everybody wants more, be able to hunt trashier areas easier.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
They want to, in general, the sites that are, pounded and still be able to find stuff that's deeper.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going to be, people wanting more depth. up to a point. But it's lighter machines. That's definitely in. Wireless is becoming like normal now almost. Most of the machines now coming out are going to have wireless headphones at the top of the line. Looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't see on here. Mark, I know you have an AT Pro. I think Bill has one. Do you guys remember if those are induction balance detectors, or are they BFO or standard, whatever, regular balance metal detectors? If you could put that up on chat, because I'm just kind of curious about the jumping around on the VDI numbers. We talk about that sometimes, how it'll jump between 30 and 50 or whatever. It's not sure what it is, and when you pinpoint with some detectors, I'm not talking about all of them, but just some of them aren't accurate on the depth by a long shot. It'll tell you 7 inches down and it's only 4 inches down. There's not, it's not within an inch or 2 inches. It's more than that. But I'm finding with the induction balance side of it, I get, especially with the Bliss tool, I can pretty much tell you exactly how deep it is just by, the way I lift the coil off the ground or working with the tone or whatever. But I'm noticing with this Quest that it's extremely accurate on depth. I mean, at depth. I mean, when it says that, 9 inches, you could pretty much guarantee it's going to be at least 8.5 to 9.5 inches down from what I'm seeing so far with it. It's extremely accurate. And the VDI numbers don't jump around typically 10 or 20 numbers. I mean, they're within 5 numbers each way, which is really good because that, if you have a dime-sized target at 70 or 80, 83, I mean, even if you see a 70 or a 90 or whatever, that it's going to be a non-ferrous item probably. And it doesn't even sing up on, like a bigger lug nuts on the ground. I went over top of them. It barely gives a signal on them, but it's also a low rating on the VDI scale, like 25 or something like that. I think it's like a pile of nails. I had like 4 or 5 nails on top of each other, and it rang out as a 25 and discriminated it out on top of that. And I know that with some of the other detectors I have that don't run induction balance, it was overloading real easy and almost like you couldn't run them on mineralized ground as easily, that kind of thing. Almost like the Nautilus,
Mm-hmm.
Craig. I think it was running. I mean, it may have been running a crude form of induction balance, but I'm not sure on the Nautilus. It's just one of the ones I know that they don't make anymore. But it was very good on good ground. But if you got any kind of mineralization, it became very difficult, if not impossible, to get the thing balanced right. If I remember what you've told me, I've never used one really. I've seen them, but do you know the
Yeah.
principle involved in those? That may be why why it couldn't work on mineralized ground, because this.
It was just a good ground machine.
Right.
Uh, you got to have filters and stuff. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking. Whites used to have. When I started metal detecting, they had the blue box machines and with the meters, and they were really popular. I mean, those meters back then were pretty accurate too. It was pretty amazing.
Well, we also run.
But they didn't go that deep, but none of them did back then. But uh, they had 4 filters, and then the Tesoros had 2 filters, and
Mm-hmm.
and the concentric. I don't know. I don't know what the. I don't know if the other machines had double D coils or not. I don't even know if they were around back then.
I don't
Were they?
think double D's came around until probably the 90s, I think, because that's when whites. I know the MXT was double D, and I'm not sure about the ones earlier than that. I'm not sure about the Mine Labs either. Thesaurus always been concentric coils, as far as I know. Maybe the newer ones aren't, but I mean the ones I remember, the Lobos and stuff like that, were all
Yeah.
concentric.
Well, the Lobo had both. You could
Oh,
you could do both.
oh,
Yeah, they
okay. I
had,
didn't know that.
but you had to have different coils for it.
Right, right. Yeah, obviously different coils. Um, with the
But the you don't see hardly any concentric anymore. Um,
yeah, not like they used to
I'm
be.
what I think. I think a lot of the technology must have back then. the jump was probably in the coils.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely.
When they went to I remember I had a double D coil, my Eldorado, I think it was.
Right.
It was. I don't know if it was called that at the time, but I think it was the same thing. It was called a wide scan, something like that.
Well, we also had.
Well,
I was going to say we also had the other ones too.
It would pick up a steel bottle cap real easy,
right?
But it would, whereas the concentric ones wouldn't. They wouldn't even, really sound off on them.
Well, I think you probably remember these, Craig. Some of you newer guys may not, but the Bigfoot coils by Sierra. They had them for the White's machines and everything. They were literally looked like a 2x4, or not that
Jimmy
big. But
Sierra, that's what it was.
Yeah, Jimmy Sierra coils or a rectangle coil. It looked maybe 2 or 3 inches wide, Craig, and about a foot long, if that.
Yeah,
it looked like
it's called a sweeper coil.
Yeah.
They got DeSoro has one.
Oh, do they? Okay. I never used one, but I've seen them, and I was going to get one, and then I tried to buy one, and I guess he passed or something, and the company was absorbed or broke up, or I'm sure you could still get them, the Bigfoot coils. I don't know. At the time, I was hearing good things about them. I just don't know. Maybe some of you guys, you guys have been in the hobby season more, maybe know more about the Bigfoot coils. If you do, put it up on the chat, or you can call in too. It doesn't matter. Our number's 352-504-4170.
He even had a couple of White's machines kind of named after him. Sierra models and stuff. I remember. He was one of the guys who put out a lot of stuff back in the old days on the Treasure magazines and stuff.
Yeah.
So I like that guy because you could learn more stuff about the machines back then from somebody like that. But he thought out of the box, thinking different things. He had a bunch of different products, I think. Didn't he gold hunt too?
Yeah. He had at one time he had a website. I think this was in. God, I want to say it was in like 08, 09. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I remember seeing him even then because I had just gotten the White Spectrum, and I was buying coils. I was buying the SEF coils, accelerator coils, whatever, and I had all the stock coils for that detector, and I was actually wanting to get a Bigfoot coil, and they had a Littlefoot too. I remember they had a Littlefoot coil. I just, I never got it. I was going to buy one, and I didn't, that kind of thing. But I'm often wondering if that would have been a better choice. It maybe not in a trashy area, but in field hunting and stuff like that, because if you're a field's going to be a lot easier to keep it level and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know what kind of recovery delay and stuff like that would affect that. Because you're not talking about a very wide coil. You're talking like a 3-inch wide coil, 4-inch wide coil, maybe, if that. And it's real long, so I don't even know how the readout would have been on that. They bragged about them a lot, and then you just didn't hear about them anymore. So I don't know whether the technology was kind of like overcome already with the improvement of double D coils in the way they're made. These newer coils all have
I think the coil is kind of made for, when you're in a big field, and just, it gives you more coverage, without wearing you out.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not really going for a lot of depth. You're going for,
coverage
and trying to get as many things as you can find.
But, and we haven't even gotten to the idea of pulse induction. Metal detectors. That's a whole, and I really am not familiar with that. I wish Dennis was on here. Ring Finder, because he uses GPXs and stuff like that, and he seems to have a pretty good knowledge of how they work. Maybe one of you guys do also, but your pulse induction, you have VLF and very low frequency, and you have pulse induction. It's almost like this induction balance. It almost acts like it's in between the two, because with the Blisstool you're getting pulse-like depth. I mean, we are actively able to get deeper than a pulse induction detector with discrimination, where a pulse induction, they don't have a physical discrimination only by ear, with like the GPX is the high-low or low-high sound of the tone and stuff. You're able to, train yourself to understand iron or non-ferrous items. But even that, with a trained ear, as you get deeper, that I was told, I think it was Dennis that told us that as that item gets deeper, that changes. Whatever the good one is, the low high, or wait a minute, I'm trying to remember. It's low high is what sounds good, I believe, normally, but it will switch when that item is very, very deep to a high low. So how do you know when that changes? I guess that just comes with experience, Craig, because I can't get my mind wrapped around it.
I've heard experienced relic hunters that hunt, the mineralized ground up in Virginia, and I mean, this one guy said, I've been hunting for 3 or 4 years with, GPX, I guess it's 5,000 or whatever. And he said, I've done really good, but he said, I have days where I can tell you that's a nail, and it always is. And then he goes, I can come out to the same spot another day, and every signal is a nail. It sounds good. And he said, I don't know why, or, what's going on, but he goes, you just, some days the machine just, works perfectly, and then some days it doesn't.
Well, it be too that soil moisture and stuff. I mean, that does play an effect on VLFs. I don't know what it plays on in the pulse induction world, but soil moisture, EMI, that kind of thing could probably play a different, same kind of an effect, but may make the sound of targets, harder to understand. Like he was talking about, you thinking it's a coin and it's a nail, but the day before he's finding, oh, that's definitely a coin. He can just tell the difference. Maybe the nuance is affected by the conditions themselves in a particular field or wherever he was hunting at. Because we know that plays an effect just with the induction balance detectors, because we run so.
I've also heard people say, just dig everything. Just
oh yeah,
don't worry about it. You're going to dig nails. Don't.
Right. Well, the GPXs are fantastic on small gold and stuff. They use them in the gold fields everywhere, and the mineralized ground and everything. I won't take that from. I just, that's not the kind of detector I prefer. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I'm sure I could if I bought one and took the time to learn it. I may like it a lot better. I don't know. But using an induction balance detector, and I need to get this Quest out there, but I mean, as far as mineralized ground, you need to take it up to somewhere with really bad mineralized ground to see firsthand in that ground what it does. See, I have dirt here from Culpeper, but real deal life in the same spot, in the field or whatever in Culpeper would be a lot better place for me to kind of put this thing through its test better than having a bucket of dirt and trying to, I don't know, the depth of the dirt. You know what I mean, Craig? 1 or 2 inches of dirt ain't doing nothing as far as the test go. Yeah. You need to have 6 or 7 or 8 inches of dirt, obviously, to simulate that kind of a ground. What I'm seeing so far with the ground balancing to hot rocks and stuff like that and being able to get through a hot rock makes me very hopeful because I know that a lot of my VLF detectors wouldn't do that. But the induction balance side, I don't know, why that is. I think that's playing a lot more effect because they've figured out how to put that in, make it workable in a metal detector versus the standard kind of balance, what they're calling BFO, right? Yeah, whatever, BFO, and versus induction balance, whatever. They haven't figured out how to make it do that, or it's harder for those detectors to do that. And this is more for the users, how this kind of in-depth, I don't know, mind-blowing kind of in a way, try to talk about it, let alone trying to, help you guys understand what I'm talking about, in other words. And I may be babbling, I don't know. Save me, Craig, save me. But no, I mean, I think about this stuff and start reading up on it, and it's research or whatever, but it helps you understand what your metal detector's doing compared to maybe another one, or what you want it to do, how to adjust it to make it work better. Which you're given a lot more options to do that with a lot of these new detectors. You have a chance to adjust a lot of things on it, and some of them you may not think that they have much to do with it. And I use, because I worked with Blistel so long, I mean, every one of those knobs works by itself, but also in sequence with others, depending on where your settings are at. And, you can use the tone to tell depth. You can, it only because it deals mostly with the subtleties of soil moisture and EMI and stuff like that. Even the threshold you can use to tell depth. And I don't do this because there's simpler ways to figure this out, but you also could tune your machine in conditions just using the tone. Leave your settings in there and have the proper tone to work in that ground that day. If you have a deep target, a whisper tone, you can actually have it at different frequencies and get it better or worse. And that'd be good for the rest of the day. So if you had a deep target with it and you mess with the tone and you're able to get it better at a 1-tone versus a 5-tone, as far as the high pitchedness of the tone, then you would want to use the one you're getting it the best with for the rest of the day. And then tomorrow it may change. But that only depends on if you dig a deep target to be able to adjust it that finely. But that's pretty impressive anyways, being able to adjust that close. And this stuff helps you. I mean, you see a lot of Ahmed's videos with the machine where he was running 10 gain and these real harsh pounding settings. And, I told him when we went to Bulgaria, we got to stop doing that, because a person that was going to take the metal detector out of the box sees your video and he's automatically crank it all the way up, because that's what the owner does. And it doesn't work like that, because it depends on your ground and if you're able to understand how to make the machine stable. That is more important than anything else on any metal detector. If your metal detector is stable, it's going to work properly. You're going to understand it better. You're going to find more stuff. Where if it's real chatty and falsing and, acting erratic or whatever, obviously you're not going to find as much. You may still find stuff. You're going to hear the peaks, and it's going to be modulated right and everything, but it's going to be a very noisy experience. And that was one of the things I really liked about, even this new Quest. I don't have to run with that threshold in my ear anymore. They're getting to be designed where you're right at that cusp. You can make it have a threshold or run chatty, but I like the idea of being almost totally quiet and just have stuff break that threshold. And that's with our machine, with the Ballisto, it was the silencer that also made the eruption of the target more pronounced, along with using it for EMI and stuff to tune out unwanted, electromagnetic interference and stuff. And a lot of machines don't have that capability either. But I mean, it's just all different, things that are on different metal detectors. Some of them have this stuff, some of them don't. And, it's all on how you use them. And you got to figure out which ones work the best in the settings part of it, to just push out as much performance out of the detector as possible, if that's what you're into. I mean, you can just turn on and go with presets, that's fine. But understand that there is a level of improvement on your settings that you yourself can do to make that machine, do what you want or be better at finding stuff for you. You don't have to stick to those presets. Don't be a slave to presets. They're a good learning tool. They get you started understanding how your detector is working. But you're really limiting your finds and limiting your experience with that detector by not exploring a little bit, at least, on recovery delay, and discrimination that you want, the tones, even the gain and the sensitivity. Some of that's changing, Craig. The Quest doesn't even have a gain; it has a sensitivity. Kind of going with the same preference that we did with the Bliss tool, where we had a gain and a sensitivity being a threshold. So it does get confusing. It can fry your mind if you let it. I've burned many brain cells over this thing. But
I just thought of something. What if you had a detector that when you ground balanced, it also tested the ground for sensitivity and gain and, any other thing that affects depth or,
Mm-hmm. Well, they do have that. Actually, the White Spectrum V3 actually would give recommendations on gain. It would test, when you pump the coil, it would tell you an RX gain of 5, or I think you had a choice between, I think it was 10 on the gain. Well, it doesn't really matter the numbers, but it would give you a suggested, recommended gain setting. Now, you didn't have to stick with that, but that gave you a starting point if you may be able to bump it up or move it down. But in metal detecting, I've learned a lot of times less is more. Just because you're pumping power, and that was a big...
Yeah, but what if you didn't even have to do that? What if you just did it automatically? And then as you're sweeping, it was always, examining the ground to make sure that it was, perfectly balanced like that.
Well, they do. Actually, the
I've
Quest
never heard of a machine that's that way, but...
The Quest actually tells you your minute on a pie chart your mineralization level, and your I think it has EMI on it. I have to look at that for sure, but I'm pretty sure it has a graph on there, a small one. It's just a pie chart like, and it will light up as it finds mineralization as you're swinging, as you're working. So they are incorporating that technology in already. I don't know about of course, when you ground balance, you're physically ground balancing the machine. But they also have an offset where you can go to a different setting. Right on the bottom, it's called a CG or a GC setting, where you can actually set your ground balance exactly where you want it, not where it's telling you to. So you can run a positive ground balance, because when you're totally ground balanced, and I don't know, this is what I've known to be true for me and with the detectors that I've used. When you're dead on ground balance, it's perfectly ground balanced, you're actually losing depth already. When you go to the positive side, a few notches, then the detector is actually more sensitive and getting deeper targets, but it can be in sometimes a little bit more chatty, or you're going into a ferrite or a iron ore ground balance, because there's certain situations, Craig, I can just crank the ground balances up to 10 and run that machine and be fine with it and still get depth. But that's also the way that that machine's wired. Now, this new one, I've worked with it a little bit, like on Hot Rocks. I was able to turn it up. It goes from 0 to 99 on the manual, actual physical manual ground balance of the machine, where you could set it permanent where you want it. And I was able to ground balance, auto ground, or pump the coil, in other words, manual ground balance like you would normally manual ground balance a machine on a Hot Rock, and it was coming up into the 80s. So I set my permanent one on 82. And that's, it totally knocked out the Hot Rock. And as far as I know right now, with the amount of mineralized soil that I have, it worked on it too. But it was still reading up on the pie chart where, I think it was half the pie chart was covered when I went over that Hot Rock. So it's already telling me it's dealing with mineralization of some kind. So it's just very interesting. You can get really technical with these, but it may help you buy a machine. If you're going to toss up between brand A and brand B, you could take these things and look at them side by side and compare what the frequencies are, what the capabilities of the machine are, and how they work individually to make a decision on which one you want, which one has the capabilities that you want in a machine. And frequency too. I mean, some of these machines, like the Quest 40 runs at 13 kilohertz, but the Quest 20 runs at 5 kilohertz, which is really low, I thought, because, I've never really heard of one that low, but it seems to work good. It gets a 7 or an 8-inch dime. And it's the way that the other settings, the other adjustments are, I think, to work with that frequency. Now, when you get into the Quest Pro, you can, there's 5, 13, and 20. So they've added all the capabilities of those three those three frequencies into the Quest Pro. And it's something I'm going to have to work with a little bit more, but it's nice to know that. I don't know if the Equinox has that. With MindLab, they've always been real good about having lots of frequencies, or being able to work in between, or all frequencies at once. Yeah, I think the E-Track had.
Yeah, no, it's all at once. I had the Explorer. That's the way I ran that.
Easy. Sorry, guys. The dogs went crazy.
They also work better in mineralized ground with all those frequencies.
Right,
and,
right.
I think, on certain targets, I seem to get, really good depth, like on lead. I always got really good depth on lead bullets with the Explorer.
Well, it's a higher conductor, like silver, is a very high conductor, where gold is a very low conductor. And, and it does make a big difference. Like, I know that, and I'm just using it as an example because I saw it firsthand with the Excalibur too. The guy was out there working. We were doing wet sand testing and stuff, and he just happened by, and he goes, God, I can't even hear these gold rings. It's not barely even giving me anything. But they were buried like 12 inches down. But he was able to get the silver ring. And the gold rings were about the same size. We had a men's gold ring and a men's silver ring buried in the ground at 12 inches, I believe 10 or 12 inches. And he could not hear that 14 karat gold ring at all but he could pick up that silver ring all day long. And Mike was telling me that's just because silver's a better conductor, and because of the way that the Excalibur is balanced, they don't take it out. What's the word I'm looking for, Craig? They tune the machine, and it's not as conductive on gold as a land machine because of the saltwater compensation that it has to be able to work in the salt water. It does something, and I'm not explaining it real good, but anyways, it's not knocking them at all because Excalibur 2s, I mean, fantastic. They use them out in the water all the time. I'm not knocking them at all. It's just that the way that they've been able to do that, they figured out a way to do it, and for whatever reason, gold rings and stuff like that are not as capable on that machine at great depth. But when you're hunting cuts and stuff like that in the water, those rings and stuff might only be 5 inches down in that cut. So, there's been a lot of success with those detectors as far as in the water. CZ21 from Fisher. I mean, Mike swears by that machine in the water. Matter of fact, I think he has 2 or 3 of those machines because he really likes them. In case everyone ever breaks, he has another one. Kind of like the Sovereign GT. Detecting Lifestyle. Dave McMahon, sorry. He loves that Sovereign GT on the beaches, and he understands it, and everything. But there's something about that machine. He's able to tune that machine really good because he's used it for so long. He understands it. But they changed. They stopped making the Sovereign, I think, Craig, or they changed it somehow, and he wasn't able to get that.
No, they don't make them anymore.
Yeah, they stopped making them or something. Yeah, he was really upset about it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were too because they were having a lot of success with it. But I don't know if it was competitive with our detectors now. I don't think it would have been unless you were, pretty familiar with it. A lot of these machines, right out of the box, I mean, you're getting pretty good depth out of them. Even the lower end detectors are getting better. I mean, they're in the last year or two. These Quest really blew my mind. I just never, when I started out detecting, I mean, I was lucky to get a 5-inch nickel, and that was doing good for the detector that I bought, entry level or kind of more or less entry level. But now shoot, at least a 10-inch nickel. I think most of these machines can get a nickel at 10 inches. I would think, or at least 9 inches. Bliss Tool, I'm able to get them at like 14 inches down with the 11-inch coil. So I mean, it depends on the technology and the machine, I'm sure, but it's not out of the realm. But 15 years ago, the lower end machines, they couldn't even touch anything really. I mean, you get the recent drops, the 2 or 3 inch stuff, maybe 5-inch, but after that, unless it's quarter size or something, depth has always been something we've strived for. But I think, well, with Craig and I, we want the depth. I mean, no doubt, but I'd rather, like we've seen, the discrimination capabilities, the depth, the power, everything kind of be improved together, because it's not just all about that. You can get 2 foot down in the ground, but if you can't tell what the heck you're digging, it's kind of useless because you're going to be digging up a lot of nails that way. You can't discriminate or have a target ID on something that deep. It's not really feasible. You can get so you have to have that other stuff built into that detector to help you out to tune it in, to know what you're digging, or at least have an idea whether it's non-ferrous or ferrous. And that was always my big deal with metal detectors. As long as I was digging non-ferrous items, and I was okay with that. And I've gotten to the point now where anything bigger than any iron that's bigger than maybe a silver dollar, that size of a target, I don't mind digging those because it's bigger iron. I don't want to sit there and dig square nails or anything all day long, so I tune those out. But anything bigger than that, iron-wise, I want to dig it because a lot of stuff was buried in metal items, paint cans, syrup containers. I mean, you hear a lot of stories over the years. Syrup containers, I don't know why, Craig, that I hear it down here a lot. They found a catch of coins in a syrup container. And I don't know what kind it was, but, canning jars are another thing. If they have the metal tops versus the zinc, we dig a lot of the zinc tops already, but, that comes up really high like silver does on most detectors, on those mason jar lids. So, people buried stuff more often than not. I would think in canning jars or paint cans, something like that, or whatever kind of can they had, oil cans, or I don't know. But they're usually metal, so why wouldn't you want to dig a big metal item if you're in an area that could have a catch of coins? Where people didn't believe in the banking system in the 20s because of the Great Depression, and they were burying stuff. A lot of people around here. I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago is when the kids they were digging out in the yard, and they found a syrup container full of 1930s and 40s dimes and pennies, and like somebody's buried a piggy bank almost, but it was a syrup container that was just filled with them. And there was another paint can filled right where they put the new park out of here in Bushnell, and that's been about 5 years ago, 4 years ago anyways. There was an old foundation where a building used to be, just the bricks on top of the, or not, just under the surface of the ground, and they found a bunch of silver dollars or something in a jar right there. And so there is catches of coins around, or big coin spills, whatever you want to call them. But how much stuff has been buried over the years in metal boxes and everything else, so you definitely want to try to dig some of that stuff just in case, and you might get 50 pieces of junk, but then might get the 51st might be something really, really cool. So, I hear guys saying they want to dig bayonets, they want to dig swords, they want to dig this and that. But if you're not digging iron, you're probably not going to get it, or you're going to think, oh, it's just a piece of junk, I'm going to go buy it. These overloads and stuff like that. So, you kind of pick your poison on that. I always go for the, if I get something that's pounding, or whatever, really nulling out the, detector, I want to see what that is. What is in the ground there? So, and once you hear that signal, and once you understand what it's reading up as and everything, when you go over that kind of signal again, you automatically know, okay, well, this is probably something I want to see what it is, and whether it's junk or not, I don't know, but I want to get it out of the way anyways, because that could be masking up a bunch of targets underneath. So, or around it anyways. I know when I found that 38-pound D-shackle, all kinds of targets came up around it and underneath it. They're mostly pull tabs, and which was weird. I don't know how a pull tab gets below a 1800s D-shackle, or early 1900s anyways. But it did. So, but yeah, we were, digging these things up, fireman wrench, for the fire hydrant wrenches and stuff like that. We were finding those near pipes going to nowhere. I even found some kind of pipe with a brass. It was a 2-inch pipe that was solid brass, went straight down in the ground. I don't know if that had been a well or some kind of pipe coming out of the ground. I don't know. I don't like messing with that stuff. I capped it off actually because it was sticking up above the ground a little bit, so I bent it over into the ground. This is an old house site, probably I think it was torn down in 1950, but I couldn't think of what they were using brass pipes for. Copper pipes, I understand. I found brass every once in a while. It's not like a common thing, but I found a 3-foot piece in a totally different area, and it was really thick, heavy brass pipe. I guess it'd be used for. The only thing I can think of, Craig, is some kind of gas line, maybe. I don't know what they.
Yeah, it could be.
It was just just heavy duty stuff, but I find copper pipes all the time. I'm sure a lot of you guys do copper ground wires, this and that. But yeah, these detectors, it just seems like they're progressing. I just wonder what they're going to come up with next, technology-wise. Not you only can build up. I use it as an example with Craig. Back in the day, said you got a 350, Chevy engine or something like that. There's only so many modifications you can do to get more horsepower and torque and speed and all that before you just can't. There's nothing else to do. You got to buy a different size engine or come up with a totally new way to give it those capabilities. Whether it's add a blower to it or a turbocharger or whatever, you get to that point where you have to change your technology standpoint and how you're going to get more out of it, or how you're going to change up to something totally different to get more efficient out of it. So that's why I treat metal detectors. How much horsepower do they got? So, but I found that even working with your normal hunting settings, your environment dictates that because you hunt, say, all summer long with these certain settings, and then all of a sudden it hits the rainy season and the ground's totally saturated. Those settings that you used in the summertime when it was dry are probably not going to work as well in the saturated ground after it's rained for 2 weeks or whatever, or after a snow melt, where it's all the water's really saturated like a sponge underneath there. Your detector, you'll find, if it is too much power, it's going to get unstable. It's not going to work right, or it may not be enough power. Usually water conducts better. I noticed that in Sam and Evan's video, and it's something that I thought about after they had made it. We've talked about it on the show, how wet that ground was, and every one of those machines, they knew them. Evan knows his, and Sam knows hers. But was that ground saturation so heavy that it was causing it to have an effect on the capabilities or the performance? And then the Equinox came in there. Well, Sam set it up like they said. She moved up a little bit on the gain or on the sensitivity or whatever, and was able to get these targets a lot better. But it was also a machine that she'd never really used yet, so she was more in tune with what she needed to do or what she had to try to adjust to get it better, where the other detectors, they just, they know those machines, but, it could have been, ground saturation that was causing them a little bit of problem anyways. I noticed with the T2 that Evan was using, I know he knows that machine backwards and forwards, and I was surprised on some of those targets that it didn't get it. But, that could have been a good explanation why it didn't. And I think we did a show on that too. So, a lot of, I'm looking on here on the, let me see here. See Mark. Sorry guys, I'm going down through the chat here to see if I'm missing anything. You guys are chatting up a storm, so I'm having a problem catching up a little bit. Shoot. At any rate, some of the other stuff that they're coming out with too, Craig. I mean, I wonder if they're going to come out with a different, I don't know if it's even possible to come out with a different kind of coil. We have a double D, we have a concentric. Is there anything else that would work on the same way as a double D does, but with more sensitivity to it? It's going to sound dumb, but a triple D coil, I don't know if that even counts, but you know what I mean?
I was thinking that too,
Well, we have elliptical coils, but I don't know if that, I haven't looked up the definition of what they call elliptical versus double D versus concentric. I mean, I think it's more of a design thing than anything. But whether they can design one even more extreme or more, I don't know, just being kind of silly here, but a triangle coil or something like that, something to give it better performance in some way, shape, or form. Maybe, to be able to change the style of it to make it better. I'm sure they're doing that too. A lot of, these tinkerers, I like watching guys, like Hendricks work on stuff because he just gives you a lot of ideas or thoughts on the imagination of what you can actually do with a metal detector. I'm seeing more stuff where, I've often wondered if you change the frequencies around, how sonar works. Obviously, it bounces off, comes back to it. That's how they tell how deep something in the water or whatever in the ground, these ground penetrating radars and stuff. What would be the technology to be able to for us to tell, I don't know, regular ground, like down here in Florida, it's mostly sand, but, we do have limestone rock. Is there a way to detect that? Or arrowheads, or, because it's flint, if it has some kind of a way of not dealing with metallic or irony, whatever metal, but dealing with the type of stone or something like that, a really dense flint stone versus, limestone rock, is a lot of difference in that. So at least structure. But it'd be interesting to see. I mean, I know somebody will come up with something. It seems like more and more technologies, this wireless technology and everything else is just really popping in the last 5 years. And a lot of that too. I'm watching that show, Craig, Ancient Aliens. It's a series they have out talking about, not necessarily conspiracy theories, but just UFOs and this and the Egyptians and Sumerians and Mayans and all that, and how everything could have happened or whatever from the information. I really enjoy that series only because they bring up a lot of good topics. I don't necessarily believe everything they say, but hey, you never know what might be true, what isn't. But they talk a lot about Tesla and how he came up with the original wireless technology back in, what did he say, 1934
1890
or 1890? Yeah, 1899.
Early 1900s. Yeah,
it was 1899 where he figured it out.
Remote control boats.
Mm-hmm.
At Madison Square Gardens. I think he had like fluorescent bulbs that could that were wireless. That
right.
He'd sent energy through to and lit them up.
Yeah, they showed that on this
power.
Mm-hmm.
One guy, somebody asked Einstein what it was like to be the smartest person that ever lived, and he said, "I don't know. Ask Tesla."
Yeah, they actually worked together on the Philadelphia experiment or something like that, or the one where they were trying to do the.
That was probably after Tesla died.
No, actually, they worked together.
But it was all this was all based on his work. I mean,
right.
Yeah, they had all these.
He had 700
electrical generators caused in a field, and they were kind of like offset, so it caused this weird effect.
Well, they said on there he had.
I read a book about it all over the years. You can almost like time travel or something through this thing.
Right. Well, he actually came up with 782 patents in his life for products or items, whether they be for power or whatever. Ideas, I think, even for the missiles and pulse cannons and or death rays, whatever you want to call them. He actually came up with that idea in the 40s, and I think Einstein came up with the A-bomb, or whatever. And the military had a choice which one to go with or whatever. They went with the A-bomb or something. They were able to produce it faster. But yeah, they he's come up with a lot of technology. He actually had. I forget what they call it. I'm going to call it a Tesla coil, whatever. That big tower he built out in Colorado. And then he had another one that he had built.
Well, there was a Tesla coil inside, all the cars in the old days.
Right. He had actually came up with the first electric car, too, that was a 1930-something Ford, I think, and it was powered entirely on electric or something like that. They showed it on the show there. Just so much information, your mind would fry, trying to keep track of it all. But, the wireless part of it, where he was able to put light bulbs, stake them into the ground and light them up. And I saw that done recently on another show, a series, where they had one of those, it's a smaller version, it's like maybe 12 foot tall, but they were actually put a remote control boat out in the water, and it gathered its power from that coil, and he was able to take that remote control boat, around the lake and everything like that. And they were also able to light up stuff that was 7 to 10 feet away from it by grounding it into the ground. I mean, so the technology there for electricity, but the wireless technology, the sound, the radio waves, that kind of thing, a lot of that's Tesla's, some of his ideas anyways, I would think. That's what he was shooting.
Well, he invented alternating current, which we still use today.
Yep. And, when he passed or whatever, when he died, they didn't find anything of any of his notes or anything like that. That's what they were talking about on the show. It's like, okay, this man, his apprentice, said he was working on all this stuff, but where's all the information? And they couldn't. I don't think they ever found it all.
They think the government stole it.
They said the FBI come in there and took it or something. I don't know, but I don't know if I believe that part of it. But it's neat, the stuff the man came up with. You think about on a big scale. I mean, him and Einstein, and just brainiacs that just knew and had an understanding of how this stuff worked. But they were all from the same generation. Now they have kids that are. I've watched some of these kids on TV, the Steve Harvey show or whatever. They talented kids from around the world. They bring them in there. They do whatever. They have mathematicians, kids that can spell, kids that have the ability to memorize an entire book, photographic memory. And you can say a paragraph or a few sentences off of any page, and the kid knows it, knows what page it's on. It blows my mind that the thought, how educated or how much brain activity these kids have going on. to understand this stuff, because it's beyond me. This mathematics thing. I mean, Craig, this kid could, you throw any math problem in the world at him, and he just spout it right out.
That's why I don't do good in math.
Yeah. Never
I
had
was
patience.
terrible in math. I thought I was an idiot, but I don't visualize at all. My dad and my brother both were just brilliant in math. My dad taught, tutored every kid in the neighborhood in advanced math.
Yeah.
I couldn't even get through algebra.
Oh, I couldn't either.
Oh,
God, I hated algebra. I could never get the correlation between numbers and letters. I just couldn't fathom it. So.
But I don't think I don't know about my brother, but my dad never finished books. He'd read a book, but he wouldn't finish it. Whereas I always finished books, even if it was a bad book, I had to finish it.
Oh, my dad.
I just like reading,
My dad would read and read. And from the time he was like 9 years old, my grandmother always told me I couldn't keep a book out of your father's hands all those years. My dad read everything. I mean, I don't care if it was spy novels or electronics things or whatever. He was self-educated in a lot of stuff. I never had that. My sister does. My sister loves to read, and she reads all the time. Unless it's a metal detecting manual or something that I have to read, I usually don't worry about it. You know what I mean? It's just not interesting to pick up a book and read it for me. I don't know. Some people like that.
Well,
sometimes
the internet's changed everything for me. I don't read physical books anymore, and I rarely read novels that much anymore. But I read articles, and
I do too. Yeah,
and I research more stuff. If something pops in my head, I just Google it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden it starts leading from one thing to another. And pretty soon a couple hours has gone by. But that's just that's what I like to do now. Is just discover new things. It's just there's so much stuff. You can Google anything nowadays, or you can YouTube it. YouTube's like the second or third biggest search engine on the planet.
Right.
And,
it definitely helps me out. But
my friend Mike mostly did all the work, but we fixed the wash machine. It stopped at 2 different parts, and we just Googled it. The guy did a video on how to put it in, all the stuff to do. I think the first one was like 15 minutes maybe.
Mm-hmm.
The second time was a little bit more complicated. It was about a half an hour or so. But the part was like $6 on the one. It would have cost me at least $150, $125, $150 for somebody to come in and fix it.
Right.
And if I had to replace it, it would have cost $400 or $500 easy. So that saves you a lot of money. It was a $6 part. They gave me 2 of them, and it was $7 for the shipping.
Oh wow. Yeah, it's weird. Mark was just saying on here that the Knox he likes it because you can start it up by pushing 3 buttons, and a lot of these detectors are getting better about that. Like the Quest, I hit 1 button to turn it on, and you hold the ground balance and ground balance it, and you're ready to go. As long as you know what it tells you what. I think it comes when you turn on and go. It comes in coin mode already. So that's really nice that you start out with, so people can kind of just turn it on and go with it. They're not going to get the best performance out of it until they really ground balance it and stuff like that. But a lot of these machines are pretty nice in that aspect. You can almost turn them on and go, like they say, and they'll work for you. I think the problem they have is people don't understand how they're adjusted. The newcomers, I'm going to talk about the experienced guys, but like a newcomer to metal detecting, you buy your metal detector, you turn it on, you go through, then you start adjusting things right away, and it may mess you up a little bit, or you don't understand exactly what you're adjusting. That's why I always say, hunt for a few days like that, just to get your mind wrapped around on how things might be working, or what you need to change on it. And when I had my mom metal detecting down here for Mother's Day, she wanted metal detect and everything I talked about the last show, just in the way that I'm explaining stuff to her. I got to remember, hey, she's never done this before. And I'm over here setting her up like one of us, like I would, Mark or Brandon, whatever. I set them up just like I'm hunting, but that may not even be their style. So you got to kind of take into account that they don't understand what they're doing. You have to physically show people, or kids, like your grandkid or son or daughter or whatever, how to metal detect properly, so that they don't, in a way that's not going to hurt them, and as far as their arm or whatever, being sore and stuff, shorten up the detector shaft and showing them just how far to swing with it. Don't do it like you're doing it because you're covering a lot more ground. You want them to enjoy themselves and actually not, for a longer period of time before they get tired. So they understand what they're doing and they're having fun and everything. So, that's one thing I did learn, because I probably, she told me her arm stopped hurting the next day. So that was a good thing. But, she's 71 years old too. So, for her to get out there and hunt for 2 or 3 hours and never really actually metal detecting like that, I thought it was pretty good because she followed me around, digs the holes and everything like that. She likes doing it, but she just got a wild hair and said, "Hey, I want to learn how to metal detect." So, heck, took her out there. And the machine, if she was using it weighs under 3 pounds. So it wasn't necessarily the weight. It was just the way that she was swinging the coil, trying to, she was keeping the coil nice, like an inch above the sand, maybe. Totally level. She was very careful on all that. She goes, well, I just did what I see you and Craig and the other guys do. When you're metal detecting and at the hunts and stuff, she's actually watching too, and she'll hit me in the shoulder, that person's not swinging right. I said, well, they do it their own way. She goes, well, yeah, but that's not the way you taught me how to do it. I said, well, that may, that's just the way they want to do it, because that's kind of they may have a different way of working the detector too. They may work better for them. So, but, it's kind of neat that she was spotting that or whatever. And why are they pouring water on that coin or whatever? I said, I don't know, Mom. I don't know. It's one of those things where they want to see what it is. She goes, but you told me that's not good to put water on some of this stuff. I said, no, it isn't. So, yeah, I have to explain myself even further, but to keep her from making a mistake like I've made, or, Craig, you've done the same thing in the past. You don't think, and you end up like the King George coppers.
Yeah.
We really didn't know that because we've never really had to dig them about pouring water on them. You don't want to do that. You want to, get as much off of there with a fine toothbrush and everything. If you want to find a date.
It's the same thing with any copper coin, even a wheat penny.
Right.
You don't really want to, unless it's, doesn't have any wear at all, hardly, then you don't want to really, put water on them.
Right. They said better.
A lot of times I would use like olive oil or Vaseline just to get the dirt off. I just rub it with that instead of water.
See, I've ruined some coins with that. Even I've soaked them in oil, like vegetable oil or whatever.
Yeah, I'm just talking about cleaning them off with your fingers, and
Makes
wipe
sense.
it off with a paper towel until you got all the dirt off of it.
Right.
That seems to work. Or peroxide.
Peroxide. You use that a lot. Yeah, you use that a lot. Molasses for iron. Craig's a chemist, man. I tell you, he gets in there and starts mad scientist, all this cleaning products. I've used electrolysis, and Brandon informed me that I was trying to kill myself with the stainless steel. Don't ever use stainless steel for electrolysis. It makes a noxious gas, and it will kill you if you're not in a well-ventilated area. Thank God I was outside in the garage, so... But yeah, you got to be careful on how you clean some of this stuff. You can ruin something so easily. These buttons and stuff, man, they've been in the ground for so long, and even bottles. At the DIV hunt, they were finding old whiskey bottles and the beer bottles, and that's the first thing the guy said: don't do anything with it. Let it just sit for 2 weeks. Don't even, because it has to get acclimated back to being in the oxygenated air instead of being in the ground. Packed in the ground, like you'll actually crack a bottle, I guess, or whatever. If it is old enough and in the right conditions, it could ruin the bottle if you start cleaning on it right away. And Craig and I have found, Craig, I don't really clean anything anymore. I brush it off. A lot of my bullets and copper items, pennies, stuff like that, I really don't clean them like with peroxide or anything, unless I want a date off of it. It's about it. And if it's that bad to begin with where I can't get a date, it's probably toasted anyways, kind of thing. But like the buttons you get and stuff, I know you just take a toothbrush or whatever and just brush them off real nice. And hey, so it has a few particles of dirt on it.
It's a judgment call. A lot of times, like we have good ground, so a lot of times there's not much corrosion on the stuff we find in the yard, but especially the brass. But with experience, you know how much to clean and how much not to.
It's better not to clean enough than to clean too much, because
Yeah.
you can't back it off once you've done it. You might as well just, might as well just not ever know what the coin is. And we had that happen with the King George's, and we couldn't,
I think there's a couple sites on Facebook that where you can ask about cleaning and people will tell you. But you a lot of times you learn the hard way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God! It's like you ruin a coin that had a good hard date on it, and it's an old coin, and all of a sudden you can't see the date anymore.
Yeah.
It's not real fun. So, went through all that. You finally got this great coin, and then you ruined it. So it's best to be careful. It's like that last militia button I found. It took me 3 days of just brushing it a little bit and looking at it, and I started looking in the book, and I narrowed it down to it was probably this one that was triple gilded at one, and turned out the back of it was, it was a convex button, and
right.
The back of it was just like triple gold on it. It's just amazing how much, how shiny it is. It's just crazy. But the whole button was probably like that at one time.
Yeah.
And it may be still some gold underneath, but I got highlights on the front to come out. But I was afraid to do too much, But
well, they had,
the judge call. If it starts looking pretty good,
we'll leave it
alone.
Yes. If it starts looking real nice, boom.
Usually, it's not going to be perfect, to begin with.
You don't want it to be.
There's going to be some little piece where there's not any gold. The gold will be rubbed off or whatever.
Well, it's kind of like the guy with the 3-ringer bullet that you found, and he showed it to you, and it was totally shiny, like a brand new bullet. Well, you don't want to take the patina off it, guys. The patina's what it's, this is to the new guys and gals and everything. You don't want to scrub the white-looking stuff off a Civil War bullet. That's the patina. That's I don't know. I think that's the character of the bullet and everything else. If you scrape all that off there and clean it all off of there, then it's no different than... To me, it's no different than a regular bullet, character-wise, whatever. It looks like a brand new bullet that way, And you could press those out if you want. If you had a press for them, you can, or whatever. You could pour your own 3-ringer bullets if you wanted to. But the patina is what tells you. Number one, it's old.
Like if you have like an Indian head penny and it's real green, that's good. I mean, those usually look pretty good. Just brush it off. Don't even don't put any water on it. Don't put anything on it. Just brush it off.
That brought.
I know people that, relic hunters that would do what they call uncleaning. The button wouldn't look very good, and they would basically highlight the button with dirt.
Yep.
And they'd take Vaseline and dirt and highlight the button, and all of a sudden you could see the design and everything of the button, instead of not being able to see it. But it's called uncleaning.
Right.
It's like a weird thing where you dirty it up and make it look better.
Yeah, well, we've seen, I've seen some few, these, we'll call them fictitious kind of looking videos where, you see a guy pulls out, I found a silver dollar, and, he pulls it out of the ground and you see a daub of dirt on top of it. But you could see when he knocks the dirt off of it, there is no dirt in any little part of this thing, and it's nice and shiny. And it's supposedly been in the ground for 100 years. Well, okay, that, even in Florida, our silver comes out, well, at least the silver I have found here in Central Florida, it comes out dark maybe, a little bit dark, but it's, I found some very nice looking mercury dimes that are almost like you took them out of your pocket. But they do have that darkness to them in the crevices and stuff where you could tell, they were in the ground. You can't just fake that. You can't just, that's like a patina.
Yeah,
almost.
If
you can't fake that.
High-powered magnifying glass or a loop, you
can
see where the sand put marks on the silver.
Right.
Very, you got to have high magnification, but the collectors aren't going to buy those as graded coins usually.
No,
unless it's something super rare where there's only about
Yeah,
100 of them
19
or less.
was a
You know,
1914
and
Mercury dime or
you
something. Yeah, then it's worth,
know,
it's going to be worth some money. But I think there's two. We've talked about this on the show too. There's two realms to coin collecting. One is the typical, coin collector that he wants, very fine, pristine, mint condition kind of coins. They're worth more to them. They're worth more generally. But then there's the coins that we find, which, have a heavy patina on them. They may be holed. They say, oh, it's a hole in it. I don't like that. A hole is character. Somebody took the time to put a hole in it, to sew it into their clothing, wear it as a necklace or whatever they did with it on a string. And they did this during the Civil War. I hear about it with Indian head pennies and stuff, so that they'd always have a way to have. Hang on a sec. Sorry, guys.
well, in the colonial times, they didn't have pants. I mean, the pants didn't have pockets.
Right. Go
So
ahead and talk for a few minutes, Craig. I got to deal with something here. Go ahead and talk about it.
All right. Well, they had to. They usually put a thread or something and threaded the coins, through the loops. And I found a coin spill one time with I think it was five reals and two bus uh, dimes, and I think three of the reals had holes drilled through them.
Yeah, Craig, if you got a topic you want to talk about for about 5 minutes, man, okay? Because I got to take care of something. I'm sorry, guys. It just something came up. Okay, so Craig, I'm just going to let you talk.
All right.
All right.
But I think like cut coins, you don't really see too many that have hole drilled through them. But from what the collectors told me, or the dealers down in Fredericksburg told me, that they sold cut coins, and they sold the whole coins, and they said those coins were more sought after. People wanted the cut coins. He said he could get a lot more for a cut coin than he could for a whole one. And so I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, it's a personalized coin, and people think that's really cool. That's what they want. And most of these coins have a lot of wear on them because they've been in circulation. But every once in a while, you find I found a few cut. I found a two-bit cut from an 8 real that looked like it just come out of the mint. But it didn't have it was a pillar and waves, but it didn't have a date on it or anything. But most of them you find are, they've been through, a lot of circulation. A lot of times with cut coins, you also find that they're not cut. They cheat. They make them smaller than they're supposed to be. And so it's kind of human nature. My mother said one time that my grandfather, and this is probably in the 1930s, the butcher, he would tell the butcher, take your thumb off that scale, and they would put their thumb on the scale to, make stuff weigh more. So, people cheat all the time when it comes to something like that. But it's still, you can kind of, it's like a lot of people used to take gold coins and they bite them, and if it didn't, gold is soft, and you could tell by biting it. But I don't think too many people back then, except if you were rich, had gold coins much. But I saw one recently where the Hoover boys were hunting in some riverbank or something, and Brad dug a gold coin, but he said they were hunting at night with headlamps on, and he broke the coin into pieces. It was a 1736 gold franc, and a pretty big coin actually. But I think that was the first gold coin that the Hoover boys ever dug. But I've been on 4 sites over the years where I saw people, dig a gold coin, and the guys, they couldn't even hunt after they found it. It's like everybody else was hunting like in a frenzy, but they were like in shock, just standing there looking at it. But I haven't found one yet, but I'm hoping to someday. It would, even if I didn't, I'd still, I can't complain. I found a lot of good stuff over the years, and it's been a lot of fun. We were going to hunt today in the yard, and we've had I think 7 days straight of rain. A couple of days in a row, it rained, 24 hours a day. So I went out this morning because the sun was starting to come out, and thought, oh man, maybe go out and hunt a little bit today. And it was like slosh. The ground was so soaked, it was actually standing water. And man, that's just too messy. But one thing bad is the grass is growing like crazy, and I got 0.8 of an acre. So that's a lot of work. But the weather's just been kind of weird down here. It's we started getting into the 80s and high 80s, and then all of a sudden it's for the last week and a half it's been in the 70s. It's a high. And
all right, buddy. Sorry about that, guys. You still there, Craig?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, brother. I am so sorry. I got a family deal going on, and Craig, you're welcome to, if you want to keep the show going, that's fine. But I've got something I got to take care of. So,
well, I'll go ahead and stop because we're at almost 9:30 anyway.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm sorry, guys. Just you can't you can't predict some of this stuff. So I gotta fly. So, Craig, thanks for taking over for me there. And we'll do this again on Thursday night at 8 p.m. We're on every Thursday at 8 and Saturday at 8 p.m. Spreaker.com. And we're kind of wrap up the show tonight. I got to take care of this, and hopefully everything will be back to normal here soon. So, all right, Craig. Well, thanks y'all for tuning in tonight, and check us out next time. Tell a friend, and we'll talk to you later. Keep digging, and God bless.